there was a lot of hard work and quite a bit of fun along with it. So I think that you'll see what a lively, entertaining speaker and how knowledgeable. And we're very happy to have Dr. Charlie Nutt, who is the Executive Director of the National Academic Advising Association, or NACADA. And so he's going to share some information that he has learned with us, and there will be time for questions and answers. And again, thank you all so much for being here. And there's refreshments.
Thank you, and I really am excited to be here with you. And please do not hesitate as I talk to ask me questions. We don't have to wait to the end if something's burning. We don't have a large group, so can you go out very quickly and just tell me your name and what you do? That way I can kind of get a feeling of who you are. We'll do it very quickly.
Neil, I teach biology here.
Okay.
Morris, Director of Education.
Okay.
Andrew Kerr, Architectural Design.
Great.
Margaret.
So,
Dean of the School of Liberal Arts and School of Arts and Multimedia.
Right, the School of Domination. Yes, ma'am.
Diane Tinter, I teach jewelry making and history of art.
Wonderful.
Bernadette Jacobs, I teach psychology.
Paul Jacobs, I teach math.
Great.
John, I teach Spanish.
John Jefferson, Title 5.
Kate Latimer, counselor.
Jonathan Harrell, Advisor.
Okay.
Ed Trios that.
Isabel Bonet, English.
Kahila Sidis, Advisor.
Justine Carpenter, Director of Student Development.
Randy Grissom, Meeting Goer.
Carmen Gonzalez, VP for Student Success.
Beverly Nursing.
Joyce Fenner, Photography.
Nan Keegan, Office of Disability Services.
Cheryl Field, Student Success.
George Fuga, Criminal Justice.
Jerry Trujillo, Chair for Trades, Technology, Sustainability, and Professional Studies.
Zuby Wilson, Coordinator for Renewable Energy Programs.
I'm not Zuby Wilson, I'm Gerard Martinez, and the advisor for the Accelerate program.
Great, great. Something I really would like to things blinding in my eye. Randy, I learned the best thing ever from a former colleague, my Vice President of Academic Affairs I worked with, because he went into every meeting with a folder. And one day we were going to meet together, and he said, "You needed a folder." And I said, "Why? I don't have anything for it." He said, "You don't ever carry anything. You just look like you know what you're doing." Right. So he would take an empty folder to every meeting, and people thought he had this folder of stuff. And he said, "It gives the impression of knowledge." So, so you know, it is exciting. It is exciting to be here and be a part of this. Just so you are aware, and Cheryl gave you my base of what I'm doing now. But I did spend nearly 20 years at a two-year college in Southeast Georgia. It was Brunswick College when I went there as a student and got my associate degree there. But then it was Coastal Georgia Community College the years that I taught developmental English, and then was director of advising, and then ultimately became vice president for student services. So I do know who your students are. And I do know the type of students you have and the challenges. I just think that's always important to kind of get on the plate here. We're working in the most challenging, difficult times in higher ed that this century has seen, and possibly higher education has seen in this country. We're under attack by legislators. We're under attack by parents. We're under attack by government. And part of that is our own fault, because we're being held accountable for things that we should have been doing and holding ourselves accountable for years. Higher education's kind of been under the radar. K-12 in the 60s, the book came out, or 70s, Why Johnny Can't Read. And everybody went after K-12. And higher ed was just kind of not bothered. Well, higher ed now is being bothered. And we're having to report. An example, University of Texas, Texas legislature last summer passed a law that demands and tells how all the universities and colleges in the state of Texas will assess their academic advising program. That's what I just said. Legislators passed a law telling them that in Texas. How many of you believe that your legislature in New Mexico has the sense to do that. No one's had it. I've worked in 2 states, Kansas and Georgia, and I can tell you, neither one of those had it. But it's because the institutions had not stepped up and said, we're assessing. They had one state senator whose son did not graduate from UT Austin when he should have, she thought, and she blamed it on an advisor. So for 4 years, she worked to get this law passed until she got it done. So we see that this is happening everywhere. We also know that this is challenging time because of all the financial crisis that we've been in this country. And higher education has been hit extremely hard everywhere. New Mexico is not an exception to that, within that. And we're being told the crazy line that we can't do, which is we have to do more with less. Folks, that is impossible. You cannot do more with less. What you can do is differently with less. Which means we're going to have to change how we've done things forever and get out of the frame of mind is we've always done it that way. Okay? Or I find myself as a historian, because I'm getting old with everybody, that I can say, yeah, we tried that about 40 years ago. It didn't work then, so we don't want to do it now. Okay? So we have those 2 points. Okay? Because they pointed at me, told me to. No, just kidding. But we know that we've got to change, and we've got to look at those. And change is not easy. Change is difficult. Change is painful. And there are 3 types of people in the world. Those are the people who make things happen. Those are the people who watch things happen. And those are the people who wonder what the hell happened. Now, some of us do that. We drive up on campus and we think, my God, that building was not there yesterday. What happened? Others of us are involved with the changes, and then we have a whole population of our campuses who are just kind of sitting back and watching until they figure out if it's really going to affect them. You know, because in higher education, we've got 2 pat lines we always say. We outlived the last president, we can outlive this one. Okay? And pendulum swing this way, and the pendulum swing this way. Okay? Folks, that's over. Okay? The changes we're making in higher education today are not going to be pendulums that swing back and forth. We need to understand. I was around in the 70s with the gas shortage and all the schools, all the problems. Schools got cut, but they all knew they were going to get that money back once the economy got good. What we have now is all we're going to get. We're never going to see our funding get back to the level that it was 5 years ago until maybe 20 years from now. And so we can't just sit back and say, well, when we get our money back, we can go back and do these things. We're where we're going to be within it. So if you think about what changes, and we all change in different ways, we all change in different avenues. That's me, 1974. That was when I was hired to teach 10th grade English. Can you believe?
Randy had a similar picture.
Can you believe somebody hired that to teach their children? Don't you love the big glasses and the poodle mustache? I mean, I was ready to go. All right? Now, folks, I'm not saying that's any better. I'm just saying it's a change. Okay? And so we changed for lots of reasons. We changed because we live longer. We changed because we were forced to. We changed because some of us see the light bulb. There are lots of reasons that we change within that. But not only do we change what we look like and what we do, we also change what we value and what we think is important. What I valued in 1974 is entirely different from what I value today. You know, what I value today are my grandbabies back in Georgia. Ella Grace, who's 4, and Cohen, who's 2.5. Ella Grace is the smartest, brightest, most gorgeous grandchild girl ever. And Cohen is possessed. We love the boy to death, but I cannot do anything but laugh at him because he does the most funny things that are horrible. We walked in the kitchen one day and my niece has a big dining room, tall, like cafe table with chairs. Cohen has climbed up on the top of that. He's sitting at the kitchen table waiting for food. And he's not scared of anything. But he's wonderful. I've always treasured this, but I treasure this as I get older. And that is that I have a 42-year-old mentally and physically severely disabled niece. and she was supposed to never have lived past the age of 22. She's now 40-something. She's my wife. You know, she's the child that we will never, ever not have Santa Claus. How many of you have kids and you remember they got old enough about to have Santa Claus? It was kind of sad. We always have Santa Claus because Dee Dee gets so excited every December. I mean, and my father years ago used to get jingle bells, and he got up on the roof of the house and would go, ho, 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 and jingle, and we would say, "With Santa Claus to the reindeers," and Dee Dee would go. So just this past year, my brother-in-law and I were doing the same thing. We said, we too damn old to get on top of that. We just went by her window and did it, and it was the same thing. So we always will have these things we treasure and are important. But we have to figure out how to work and do, and work to do that. So, back to my thing. Who are you? We know that it says the most urgent reform in most campuses in improving general education involves academic advising. This comes from the Task Force on General Education. That to have programs and courses become coherent and significant to students requires effective advising. Our students do not see the need and significance of courses. And we have to understand it. People have to understand that they are not a series of isolated courses that have no connection to each other. And it's not creating a ticket to a trade or a union card. There's a reason we're in higher ed. Okay, that is we believe people change. And we believe we're making that change. How many of you believed you changed from the moment you began your undergraduate degree till you graduated? How many of you changed? How did you change?
I think that I became more, well, as I gained knowledge, I gained a different perspective. What I felt was important changed.
Good. Who else? How did you change?
Oh, just a more well-rounded person, I guess you'd say.
How did you change?
More confidence. More confidence?
More confidence.
In myself.
Kate, how did you change?
I really learned the value of community service and service learning.
Good. Good. Middle of the back row, how did you change?
I realized what hard work is really all about.
Very good. And how many of you want that for your students? Yeah. Okay. But if we don't talk to students about what the value of their courses are and the significance, they're never going to see how it creates the whole student, the whole process. So we really have to look at it and know that that's the case. Mark Lowenstein, who's just retired from Richard Clark, says an excellent advisor does the same thing for a student's entire curriculum that the excellent teacher does for one course. Think back to an excellent teacher you had. What are the things that excellent teacher did that made them excellent to you?
I think he looked at things differently, perhaps, analyzed things differently.
Okay. John, what about you?
Which John?
You.
Just the more involved, just the more.
Good. Carmen?
I think kind of opened up my mind to look at things differently.
How do you do that?
Questioning, critical thinking.
Okay. Isabella, what about you?
Sense of humor.
Sense of humor. Okay. What about you?
Demands on me.
Demands. Very good. So if we think about those things, then we have to realize those are the very same things that an advisor does for the student's whole educational experience. That we're talking to them about how they grow, how they become better citizens, how they become a part of the world, how that when they begin college and in college, they're going to be entirely different people. And at community colleges, that's really important because many of our students at community colleges are very community-oriented with communities who might not value education as much as they do. And they're having to go back into a community or culture in which now they're different. And how do they fit back and how do they handle that? So that's what advisors do, is we have those conversations with students. We don't just talk about which course to take next. We're really talking about the value. And if we don't do it, no one's going to. I taught English. I did it in regard to English. You know, I could tell the math student, the math major, who says, why do I have to learn how to write an essay? Why? But I can tell you, I never talk to students as an English teacher about the value of their whole curriculum, about the value of gen ed. about how they were going to grow. That's just what was not something I thought was my job until I began to understand what advising was and what my role was. So we have to really think about that as we move forward. When asked if you have worked for change or just complain, 81% of the respondents replied, "Do I have to pick this as hard?" Okay, right? A lot of people just like to complain. A lot of people just don't want to change. And I was telling Margaret yesterday, I have a little strategy in my office, and I'm not particularly popular with them, but they come in and with a problem, and I have 2 or 3 people who are really wanting just to get it off of their shoulders and give it to me, and I will take it. And I just say, that's great. Let's meet tomorrow at 10 and come with me with 4 ways that we can that you can work to improve this problem, and then we'll be able to move forward. And they get this blank look at me. So either they're going to begin working or they'll quit coming to see me. Frankly, I don't care which. But it's the idea that we have to expect people to think and move forward. And for many of us, we like consistency. We like continuity. You know what Emerson said, consistency is the hobgoblin of little minds. You know, so we need to understand that just because we've always done it, we need to look at change and how to do that. We know, if you don't know this quote, you should. Back to 1993, Vincent Tinto says, retention is a byproduct of good educational experience. It is not the byproduct of anything that's done specifically to reach a number. Let me explain what I'm saying. I say we're going to improve retention by 25% by that next fall. And we make advising improve, we make financial aid improve, we make all of these things improve, but the classroom experience is still not the best. Or a student drives up to campus and the first thing they do is they'll holler at because they walk with the grass. We don't have much grass here. But the idea that we have to recognize that we're talking the entire undergraduate experience. We reach retention goals when we don't set goals other than making the educational experience stronger. And that's from the moment they apply to the moment they graduate. What are all the things we do? So that we begin to think, what do we define as student success? What do we define as a successful student within that? Joyce, what do you define a successful student as?
A successful student for me is somebody that feels that they have opened up that capacity to want to learn.
Good. Beverly?
I think a successful student is somebody who can take knowledge in and be able to apply that knowledge.
Good. Justine?
Success. Someone who is able to set their goals, work toward them,
Good.
and hopefully meet them.
Wonderful. With a hat, what do you think a successful student is?
My most successful students, I think, are ones who actually engage with the other students and are leaders and helpers within the whole class.
Very good. Margaret?
A student who feels empowered to take responsibility for their education, and realizes that they have choices, and is really proactive in their education.
Would any of you disagree with what anybody said just then? Okay, so the next question becomes, how are we achieving that? Where are we teaching that? Where are we making sure those things occur? And it's got to be throughout the undergraduate experience. It cannot be done just by an advisor. It cannot be done just by a faculty member. It cannot be done just by a dean or by a president. That all of us have to figure out what our role is, and then together as a community of scholars at this institution develop those processes that make our educational program better, that enhances it. Students remain enrolled and complete their degrees when they feel connected to a campus. So what do we do to connect students to the campus? And that doesn't just happen first semester. It happens every semester. Okay? A whole bunch of people come here to be nursing. They never get in the nursing program. Would you agree with that statement? Okay? The key's going to be, if they remain enrolled here, it's because they are connected to Santa Fe Community College. If they were only connected into getting into nursing, they're going to go somewhere else. Okay? University of Kentucky has been spending several years talking about how do we change our culture to, from day one, talk about getting connected and engaged. And they're working on a project that they've been working on for 3 years. It's going to take a little longer, but it came up literally by the director of Greek Life, who said, if we're serious about engaging students from the University of Kentucky, then we need to move, and I'm going to use the wrong word because I'm old, but we need to move rush to second semester and not first semester. First semester should be about becoming a University of Kentucky student, not an 85, not a Sigma Chi. That's dramatic. So what are you doing from day one to say, to get students to know they're a Santa Fe Community College student, they're not a nursing student. They're not a history student. They're not an art student. They're not a photography student. I used to go to the nursing orientation and purposely go in and say, I'm so excited you're here, you're a Coastal Georgia Community College student who happens to be majoring in nursing. Because if they're not committed to your campus, they're not going to stay when they get into trouble. Or they don't know what to do. They're going to go somewhere else. So we have to be sure we know those processes. He also says effective retention programs have come to understand academic advising is the core of our efforts. The core. Wes Hadley talks about advising the hub of the wheel. Doesn't mean it's more important than anything else, but it means for many students, this is where they learn everything they need to learn about engagement. Where does a student learn about the value of Gen Ed? Academic advising. Where do they learn about resources and services? Academic advising. Where do they learn about, so that it's the hub of the wheel, not more important, but it's the place that we branch out from. And it's the place we begin the conversation, and then in Jonathan's classroom, he's going to continue as a faculty member about his particular unit and area. So we have to think about that it's at the core. So what are we doing to engage? Now what makes that hard is there is no literature, there is no documented study that shows that if you improve advising, it will result in higher retention and graduation. There is no cause and effect research. What the research says to us is there's direct and strong cause and effect between engagement and persistence in graduation, and then there is a direct correlation between how engaged a student is and the quality of their academic advising. So we can't have engagement at a level that students are successful if we don't have strong advising to get that engagement there, within that. Okay? What do we do then? We've got to set high expectations. Number one, high expectations. Community colleges are accused of dumbing down. You know, we're accused of holding hands. We're accused of doing everything for students. Okay? And that's not what we do, but we're accused of that. How we got that? We set high standards. If a student's only expected to make a C in a class, what are they going to make? A C. Okay? If a student's only expected to come see an advisor in order to register or get a PIN number, that's the only time they're going to see an advisor. If you want students to come see advisors about how do I become more engaged, about what is general ed, about what resources are there, then we've got to set expectations for them seeing us about things other than just registration. That's the bottom line. And most of us have the expectation they only see us that one time. We even teach students that. They come in orientation, they spend here all orientation. The last thing we say is, no, go see your advisor to get registered. They didn't hear anything else that day, but they heard advisor registration. It's the only time I see them. So we have to change that mentality. And we have to recognize that just like our students in our classroom, if students come in at different levels of abilities and skills and commitment to advising as they do their academics. When I taught English, I could know by about the third day those students who would pass my course and never need to come see me outside of class. And I knew those who needed to move in with me 24 hours a day, and they would still go repeat that course. We know students who come here who have their life planned out. They walk in the first day and they say, here are the things I'm going to do. I'm a full-time mother, I'm working, this is the pathway I need to follow. I'm ready to move on. Why would we make that student come back and see us 5 times in the first semester? What would we say to that student? Would you check in once every semester and tell me where you are on your schedule? Where you are and how that plan is working out? But we also have the students who walk in and you think, my God, how did they find the building? Right? They need to see me maybe 5 times a semester. Because they have even no idea what college is. How many of you, especially our first generation, how many of you are first generation students? First person in your family to go to college? I was first generation. My mother and father dropped out of high school in the 40s for daddy to go to war. Mother married him and she went off with him. My older brother, who's 15 years older than I am, I was playing. He never went to college, extremely successful in his career, wonderful job. My middle sister went to college after she was married and had children. I was told my entire life, you're going to college. I was going to be like the savior. You're going to go to college. I graduated from high school, we'll be a town in Brunswick, Georgia. I'm working at Susan Roebuck in the summer between high school and college in the service department. The phone rang one day and I picked it up and said, this is Charlie Nutt. Can I help you? Now I said, welcome to Sears, may I help you? The voice said, can I speak to Charlie Nutt? Being the good English major I was going to be, I said, this is he. And the voice said, Charlie, this is Fred Griffith. I said, oh, I know Mr. Griffith. He was the registrar at the local community college. His wife was my art teacher in high school. Sound familiar with some of your students? And he said, Mary tells me you're coming to college this fall. I said, yes, sir, I am. He said, you might want to apply. I was just going to show up. How many of your students just show up? How many of them just walk in the door? They were driving down Richards Avenue. They got to that last little roundabout. They said, oh, this is a dead end. Let's go slow down to this. Many community college students have the total commitment to our college education. They can turn their blinker on and drive in your building. So to recognize that with the different levels of commitment and the different levels of background knowledge and the different levels of where they come from, high expectations may be different for different students. And we've got to recognize we treat and teach students differently based on where they are and their aspects. We've got to do the same thing with academic advising. Right? Next, we've got to add that support. Students have got to know that they're supported here. Students have got to know they're not in isolation. And that's hard in a community college. Because our students have the PCP disease, parking lot, class parking lot. Okay? And it's hard to get them involved, it's hard to get them to take advantage of resources and support because college is not their only priority. The days are over when even 18-year-olds coming out of high school see college as their only responsibility. You know, they've got jobs, they're paying for cars, they're paying for cell phones. You know, and then we have these really people who it is not, they're full-time mothers, they're single parents, they've got everything going on, and so it's not a full-time job to them. And how do we support them? You know, I taught developmental studies, and I used to use the example of a pie. And I said, think about an apple pie. And it comes out of the oven, and it smells great, and coming out of those little holes, there's the steam, and there's cinnamon, it's just beautiful. And somebody takes, and you divide it into 4 pieces, even pieces. One piece might be school, one piece might be family, church, job, friends. And if I take a 5th piece of pie, and I cram it in that pie plate, what am I going to have? I'm going to have a mess. I'm going to have everything everywhere. I'm going to have a mess all over me. Many of our students think they can take a full plate and drop college on top of it and still be successful. Folks, they can't. We're the people who say to them, you've got to make some hard decisions. You know, I used to say to my students, you know, what are we going to do? Well, you know, divorce your kids, divorce your husband, let him take the kids. Get him back after you get your degree. Quit work, can't quit work, I gotta have work. You know, give up your friends and don't go to church. You'll go to hell anyway. You know, what do you mean? They can't do that. So who's going to teach them that you've got to take a little piece out of every one of those? That you may have to, if you're a mother, you may have to be able to teach your children that the vacuum cleaner fits their hand. And how many of you cannot go to bed at night if there's a dirty dish in your sink? You know, it will be there tomorrow. You know, okay? How many people would die if somebody walked in your house and wrote on the top of the table in dust, "Dust me" on the top of your TV? Okay? Get over it. Give them a rag and say, "Dust me." Kids can do clothes. They can wash their own clothes. I guarantee you, the first time a 13-year-old boy goes to gym class with pink underwear, he won't put white and red together again. Right? Students cannot think that they're super people, but they don't know how to cut pieces. I had a student walk in my office one day and said, "Charlie, I can't do this anymore. I'm going to have to quit. This is horrible. I'm failing." And I said, "Well, tell me what's going on." She said, I just can't get time." And I said, "Okay, talk me through your day. Let's look at what you're doing, where we can find time." Well, she was going to be a nurse, and she worked in the summer, worked at night, 11 to 7 at night, as an entrance clerk in the ER room. She got off at 7. She was a single parent. She went home, she got her kids up, she got them dressed, she took them to school. She dropped them off to school, she came to the college and did her courses. She was an excellent student, so she never left campus without having everything done. So she spent hours in the learning center, the control centers, with group work. She got finished at 4. She went to pick her kids up from school. She then fed them. She helped them with their homework. She did all of that. The babysitter came at 8. She slept from 8 to 10, and then she went to work. I said, "Baby, you're not dumb, you're tired. You can't do that." And she said, "But I'm going to be 60 before I get this degree." And I said, "You'll be 60 whether you got the degree or not." So we got to help them understand what we do and how we get there. And we've got to think about those conversations. Academic advising, we know, is important. Okay, academic advising is all about connections and communication. Connections and communications. How do we connect students to the campus to help them become more engaged? How do we connect students with faculty? How do we connect students with ourselves? How do we teach students how to talk to faculty? That you don't send an email to faculty from bigboy9000@hotmail.com and start it with "Hey." That there is a certain way that you approach faculty and have conversations. Are we teaching them that? If we're not teaching that, who is within us? We have to have those conversations. We have to understand that they've got to be involved. Now, that's hard, but we can find ways to get them involved. If we think about how to involve them in class. You know, working on group projects in class is involvement. It doesn't always mean I come to dances or I join a club. It may be that I'm involved with students outside of class technology-wise, on Facebook, whatever, but involvement. And then the last, student learning focus. We've got to focus on the student and what they're learning. Higher ed for too many years is focused on the faculty and what they're teaching. We've got to focus on the student. And we still make master schedules on most campuses that are still based upon when teachers want to teach, not when students need classes. So I've been here 40 years, I got seniority, I only want to teach on Tuesday and Thursday, and I don't want to teach again, but I teach the one chemistry class that every nurse has to take. And half the nurses can't take it at that time. Well, take it next year, they'll be off with it. You understand, folks, we can't do that. We can't be focused. We have to be focused on student learning, not teacher teaching or administration thinking. That's the dichotomy, administration thinking. Well, we got to think about that as we move forward. And we got to recognize that students don't believe us until we prove it to them it's all about their learning. Okay? So, wonderful article in the Presidency magazine several years ago from Frances Cordova, who was president at University of California, Irvine. Phenomenal lady. and it was written from a president's standpoint. She said, what do presidents worry about? And she said, presidents worry about why our students aren't being successful. And she said, I'm a science person. She said, I'm a science faculty member. And we have students who come to us out of high school so excited about science and learning and labs, and we put them in a lecture hall of 500, and then they go to labs with TAs, and we wonder why they lose their passion. What are we doing to help students keep their passion? You know, community colleges are great because we don't put them in classes of 500, but we still have to find those ways to engage them with each other and engage them with their education and prove to them it's about learning within that. Visine serves as a bridge. And I gave you this quote because one of the things that we're learning, and I hope you will recognize, is that academic advising student success is not a North American phenomenon. It's across the world. It's a global phenomenon. This is a publication by a young lady in the UK. And in the UK, they call academic advising personal tutoring. And it said personal tutoring can provide information about higher education processes and procedures, guidance and structure, especially in those early days. Isn't that what we believe? And we're a totally different country. We just held our first international conference in the Netherlands, and we hosted totally from beginning to end. We've never done that before. We held it at the University of Maastricht in the Netherlands, beautiful little town. We hope to get 100. We hope to get 100. We had 268. We had 19 countries represented. The U.S. was one of the lowest percentage of participants. We thought we'd have the highest because it was NACADA. It was the lowest. And we had every continent but South America. And I just finished Peru, visited Peru, and figured out really what the problem is South America is so different than the rest of the world because South America is still teaching everything in Spanish. And the rest of the world, everything is being taught in English in all the other countries. So we've got to make a real connection. My buddy here is going to help me make some connections. We've already talked about that. So we got to recognize that it's a worldwide aspect. It's not just our students. Right? Advisors aid students in several things. First, the amount of time needed versus their expectations. We all use the online, don't we? For every hour you're in class, you have to do 2 hours outside of class. And that makes no sense to students because they cannot even imagine working 8 hours outside of class on anything in class. Some of them even study 8 hours in entire high school. And then we tend to do that every day. Okay. We know from the ACT survey that comes out every year that most students go into community college with an expectation of making B or higher. And we know how many do that. Some of our most at-risk students are our honor students. They've never made less than an A. And the first time they get an essay back with a B, they panic. And they just don't know what to do. So we have to understand we have to teach them that. We teach them a particular program of study versus course versus their perception. Students sometimes perceive jobs differently in careers than what they are. First thing we need to do is teach students that what their career is and what their major is two different things. How many of you are doing exactly today, what your undergraduate degree is in? Raise your hand. Okay. The faculty. Okay. The rest of us are doing something totally different. Who better to talk to students about your major and your career? Maybe two different things. You may have a career that doesn't even exist today within that. So we've got to have that conversation. You know, we know one of the biggest majors several years ago in community colleges was CSI. Everybody wanted to be a criminal forensic scientist. They really wanted to live on South Beach and drive Hummers. Okay? They had no idea what a forensic criminal scientist did. I have a friend that was at Fox Valley Technical College in Wisconsin, excellent advisor. Student walked in, cute little girl, and said, I want to be a CSI. Well, Kathy knew automatically. She didn't know what that was, but she's going to be an excellent advisor. She's talking to the student. And she said, okay, that's great. That's wonderful opportunities. But we need to start with biology in the first semester as we move forward. And the girl said, oh, no, I don't do biology. And Kathy said, but you have to do, no, I didn't, no, I don't do biology. And she said, honey, you don't have 6 classes in biology. And the little girl literally put her hands on her hips and said, I know that woman on TV did not take those classes. Kathy said, let me take you down to the theater department because that's the only place you're going to be at CSI. So what people perceive, in reality, we need to help them see that. I want to be a nurse because I get a job anywhere and it's high paying and everything's there, but I never want to leave my one little community. But oops, my one little community's hospital doesn't need any more nurses. I want to be a computer information technology, but I get hives if I have to sit too long behind a computer every day. Okay, well, part of this does not fit. Because we know they come in with those decisions. Who helps students decide what they want to major in? Who helps students decide that when they walk in?
I kind of help them a little bit if they're undecided as I advise for the school.
But when they walk in initially and say, I want to major in business, come in with
their parents.
The parents. And we all know the concept of helicopter parents. Okay, Nakata doesn't like that word. We use the word proactive parenting. Okay, but I was at another school recently, they called them submarine parents. They said they go right under the surface, they rise up, they do PD, and they go back in. And parents, friends, brothers, sisters. Okay, so we're the ones that have to really talk to them about why do you want to be a nurse? Tell me what a nurse does. Tell me what a biologist does. Tell me what a computer science student does. Okay? I failed a student totally as an advisor. And I always tell this story. Lisa, never forget Lisa as long as I live. 35-year-old, coming back to college, married, 2 children who were middle school. She had stayed home, took care of the family, took care of the children while her husband got his master's degree in business. He was a very successful banker. And now her children were in middle school. It was her turn. And she wanted to be a nurse. Very bright woman. And on our campus, you had to pass all your core courses before you got accepted into nursing. So we worked. She had a 4.0 in all her core. She was one of 400 who got accepted into one of 400 in the class of 65 that got accepted into nursing. We did the happy dance, and I sent her on over to nursing. Next semester, my secretary came in and said, Charlie, there's a hysterically crying woman outside. Can you talk to her? Well, being an advisor, I always have my supply of Kleenex. Every advisor has Kleenex, and English teacher. So put it on the desk, and here came Lisa. And y'all, I'm not talking just little tears. I am talking mascara running, snot running, hyperventilating, bawling. And I kept saying, what is wrong? Got her call. And I said, tell me, is it the blood? And she said, no, I see blood. I'm talking about. And I said, well, you do not well in your classes. No, I got an A in everything. Is it your family? No, my husband took the kids. I haven't seen them in months. It's wonderful. I said, what is wrong? And I finally got her to calm down enough that she said, we've been in the hospital and clinical for the last 3 weeks. There's a little man on our floor that I've been working with. He doesn't have any family. He's never gotten a flower. He's never gotten a card. He's never gotten a call. He's not had a visitor. He's getting released today, and he doesn't know where he's going to go. And my husband won't let me bring him home. I never said to that student, have you ever been around somebody who's scared, who's dying, who you're going to be the last person to make them feel comfortable? I never said that to that student. All I would have had to say is, tell me what a nurse does, and tell me why you want to be one, and tell me what you're going to do when you have. If I just asked some simple questions, I could have kept her from that frustration. I could have sent her on to something else. Now, we did get her majors changed. She's very successful. But I put her through such agony that I could have solved by asking a question. Education. Okay, why do you want to be a teacher? I was a principal of a high school. I never ever hired a candidate who said I would be a teacher because I love children. Nobody loves children. You don't love your own children, you love your grandchildren. Right? So I'm not hired anybody that tells me that. Because most of them have never even been in a classroom. You know, my niece was on the 8-year plan, get an undergraduate degree. You know, like preachers' kids and police kids and ministers' kids, you know, advisors' kids, they never listened to you. But it wasn't because she was dumb. She had a 3.9. She just didn't want to graduate. She loved college. So every time she got close to graduating, she changed majors. Okay? So at lunch one day, somebody said something about business. She said, I did that one time. Somebody said something about being, I did that one time. So finally she got a major. It was teacher education, and she was going to do students with disabilities. Well, my sister and I knew that wasn't going to work because that beautiful baby, the girl who's 40, who is her sister, and Amy never helped do anything with her. So it's like, it didn't help your disabled children, you know, help somebody else's little thing that's going to work. But she called me and said, I'm changing my major. After she got to student teacher, I said, why? She said, do you know those little children touch you all the time? She said, I have ruined more silk blouses since I've been there. I'm changing major. She transferred. She called me. She said, they're not giving me any more financial aid. I said, you got 6,000 hours. Do something to graduate. She graduated in nutrition fitness and became a Southwest flight attendant. Believe it together. Okay? But see, I didn't understand that. And then the college culture versus the high school culture. What is the college culture? What's the culture of Santa Fe Community College? Randy, what's the culture of this campus?
Well, there's quite a few different cultures here.
I'm sorry?
I think there's a multitude of cultures here.
Okay. Right. George, what do you think the culture is?
I'm from California.
That doesn't matter. Kate, what do you think the culture is?
I'm new here.
Margaret, what's the culture?
Well, I'd like to think that it is a culture of, we have community here and that it's supportive of our students and we're making connections with students.
What evidence do you have to support that?
It's not evidence. I think what happens here every day in our classes, in the campus center, with our clubs, with our student investors, I think that's evidence.
It's a culture
Tell
of
me some of
hope.
the evidence.
It's a culture of hope, Charlie.
I'm sorry?
It's a culture of hope.
Culture of hope. How many of you would agree with that? What do you mean by culture of hope?
I just graduated from the associate's program here in May. And I say, what I'm about to say is because I feel that characteristics I describe are part of you as well. And I say that we're scratched, dented, crushed, kicked, have been up and down in either careers or life. And that for the first time through a long journey that I had, thanks to Randy, I was offered some hope. And I succeeded with that. And I see my fellow students and those I get to advise now, and the new ones that are coming through are the same way. They're just torn and tattered, maybe in a different way. But we offer some
Would all
hope.
of you agree with that? Would you agree with what Margaret said?
I think there's an element there as well, but I think also comparing it to my own university experience, the focus very much for a lot of our students is getting a job at the end. So I think there's a certain element of that that's stronger than my experience as an undergrad so many years ago.
And,
Really, get somewhere.
Go ahead.
Boris.
Boris.
When I'm here over a year. When I decided to accept the position here, I reviewed the community and see what was their culture. And what I found out being part of the culture now is to empower students to become successful in whatever field they choose, whether it's going to a core institution or a career school. And the difference between that and high school is that high school, there's no empowerment there. It's more structured as a guide, paddling them out into the next phase. Versus over here is empowering them to really become critical thinkers, and then decide it's something of the future for us.
Okay. Do you believe that is the culture, or would you like that to be the culture?
I think it is the culture. As my department, I've seen working with other departments that it is very powerful.
Yes, sir?
I think on some level we do. That's what we want to believe, and I think that we strive in that direction. But I think when I look at the students that I teach and they walk in, I think the culture is the working culture. They work, they're always working, they're always looking for work, and they're always thinking about finding work. And a lot of times the work drives their ability even to show up. I have a lot of students who don't come, not a lot, but I will ask them, why didn't you come? My shift was changed. Why didn't you come? Because my wife had to work and I had to be home with the kids, or vice versa. It is all about work that I think drives it. We are dealing with a population that is essentially working class. Occasionally I'll have someone in there that you can just tell when you talk to them and how they live their life that it is a choice to, okay, in the summer they have the leisure, a little bit more leisure in their lives, but most of my students have no leisure. They work, they take care of their kids, and if they're lucky, they sleep. And I'm amazed at how many of them do extraordinarily well under such extremely adverse circumstances, but I don't ever disillusion myself that it's all about work, and working, 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 and finding more work. And if they can find more work, a second job, even a third job, the class, their education gets lower down on the priority list.
How many of you would agree with him?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
That's very
All right.
strong.
Yes,
I
ma'am?
might take that and spin it just a little. I think that they are often impacted by their work lives. I absolutely agree with Paul, but sometimes I wonder which one's the cart and which one's the horse, because some of my students, I think, maybe have to work in order to come to school. And so I sometimes can't tell which is the chicken and which is the egg, but he's right.
Good.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am?
In the School of Arts and Design, we service a lot of adult students, and I think that culture is one of personal enrichment. People who are retired come to make art because they always wanted to draw or paint or sculpt or make jewelry, and I would say that a large percentage of our students come from that sector of the society, and their expectations are, again, about personal enrichment.
Good. Would you agree with what everybody said?
Charlie, could I add to that?
Very quickly.
Yeah, because there is a lot of that work, and I think part of our job as advisors is to try to help them understand career versus work, because that is part of that hope. That's not just, a couple of jobs here and gigs here and there. It's that, what is that career path? What is this that you're choosing to do? Is it going to be that career path that you want?
Good. Where do students learn that? Are we having the conversation with students from day one? This is the culture of Santa Fe. This is what Santa Fe College is. This is what we believe in. This is how we drive and work here. Or do they simply know what our degrees are, what our courses are, what our majors are? Do we help them understand the culture? And if we're not, then we can't hold them responsible for not becoming part of that culture, because we never described it to them. Which means we need to have this conversation more. How many of you kind of enjoyed that last little conversation, hear what people thought? And for you, how many of you was this kind of the first time you ever had that opportunity to just talk about things like culture and that in large group? Okay? We need to begin to have those conversations more. We need to begin to have those discussions more, and then talk about how do we take that and then demonstrate it to students. What are the actual activities and strategies? In your course, what are the actual strategies I'm going to use to get that across? What are the actual techniques? What are the actual pieces? Because if we don't know, they're never going to know within that. Okay? All right? Evolution of advising, go from prescriptive to developmental. Prescriptive basically was very much, the student comes in, they're sick. Their sickness is they have no schedule. We write them a prescription, which is a schedule. They go away. The next semester, they're sick again. They have no schedule. We write them another prescription. They go away. Prescriptive was all about scheduling, and it was normally hated by everybody who had to do it. Routinely. Okay? We need to move now to the idea that advising is recognized as a teaching function. Meaning, what is it we're teaching? We're teaching students the culture of the campus. We're teaching students what it means to be a college student. We're teaching students what the concepts are. It is not prescriptive. It is not simply what we do with scheduling. We also have the problem that it's a perception of service. I said to the group yesterday, not any of you are servicing anybody. You are all teaching students at this campus. I don't care what your job title is. Just because I don't have the job title in human resources that says faculty, doesn't mean I'm not teaching. So as a community of scholars and a community of teachers, what are we doing together to have conversations about how we teach that and how we analyze that within that? And it sometimes becomes less important than other faculty responsibilities. If faculty are going to be expected to advise, then we've got to make sure faculty understand that it's important. All right? How many of you came to this campus and you knew when you got here automatically, before you ever started teaching, that academic advising was going to be something you were going to be required to do and was valued highly by the culture and administration on this campus? 1, 2. Then why do we expect people to walk in and say they want to do it and think it's important? And I used an example yesterday, but I have a lot of people who were here yesterday. What's your undergraduate degree?
Well, architecture.
Architecture. Okay. Dr. Guzman walks in tomorrow and says, we couldn't survive if you weren't here. We're going to close the campus. You know, Carmen does nothing. Randy does nothing. You're the person who does everything. Okay, what do you know is coming next? Another job. And she says to you, that sorry, no good, horrible chemistry teacher walked out. I need you to pick up 5 sections of chemistry tomorrow, advanced chemistry, and the classrooms meet here. How do you feel?
Stressed.
Stressed? How else?
Overwhelmed.
Overwhelmed? How else?
Underprepared.
Unprepared? Incompetent? Angry? Right? Sometimes we're asking faculty to do something they're not prepared to do. I know how to teach it. I can teach a monkey to write a 5-paragraph essay. I guarantee you, I can do that. Okay? But I know nothing about advising when I became a college faculty member. And no one told me what it was. My total training was my last day. Oh, by the way, the folders are in that box, bottom drawer down there of the guy you're replacing. You look at them, they'll be here tomorrow. That was my first time. So are advisors required or expected to advise on this campus in some areas? Yes or no?
Our faculty.
Faculty. Duh. Faculty.
Yes.
Yes or no?
Yeah.
Okay, raise your hand if you think they are. Keep your hands up. Do not put them down. Do not put them down. Okay? If I read a job description and I live in Spokane, Washington, and I read a job description of a job at Santa Fe Community College, is it going to say clearly in that job academic advising is a primary responsibility? Is it going to be in there? If it is, keep your hand up. Okay, some people are kind of maybe, no, we don't know. Okay. Faculty.
Faculty.
Okay, good. Highly unusual. That is not normally the case. Keep them up. And then when a candidate comes to interview for a faculty position, are they asked questions about the academic advising philosophy, the academic advising experiences, what they define academic advising in? Okay. Then how do they know it's really important and valued? That's an easy change, guys. You add one question to the interview. What is academic advising? And as a faculty member, why is it important? One question. And automatically, every candidate knows advising matters. And it's part of our culture. Easy change. What? Intersection between student behavior and institutional conditions is what we have control of. Right? Here's what students, here's what we do, and that's kind of what we have control of. Now the problem being here, though, is that we've gone from the standpoint of only focusing on students, not focusing on the institution. Cheryl, stand up. John, stand up. Okay. In the 60s and 70s, we teach in literature, Tinto, Pasquarelli, those that wrote early, they're in leaving college. He described the good students and why they remained enrolled. So he said, this is a good student, this isn't. Okay? So our response to that was we only recruited Johns. We didn't take any more of Cheryl. Well, then what we figured out in the 80s is there's a whole lot more Cheryls than there are Johns. And we're only going to go after Johns, we're going to go broke. So we got to bring lots of people in. Okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to change Cheryl and we're going to make her John. Folks, you do whatever you want to her. She ain't going to become John. She's going to remain Sarah. Okay? So then in the 90s, we said, you know, if we send her enough places, so we're going to open a career center, a tutorial center, multicultural center, an advisement center, walking around center, and I'm going to send her to every one of those centers. And if she goes to enough of them, she'll figure out how to become a John. Finally, in the 2000s, we were recognizing that it has just as much to do with the institution as the student about whether students are remain enrolled. What do we do here that are obstacles to students? What do we have here in our organizational structure that basically says to a student up front, we don't really care whether you succeed? This is hard. We have to really analyze what we're doing on a campus and seeing what it is we need to do differently, because it's not just about Cheryl. She's not the only thing that has to change and grow in order for her to be successful. Institutions got to change and grow. You have an entirely different student body than you had 30 years ago. Entirely different. But are we still using the same policies we did when we opened 30 years ago? And I would bet you are in some areas. Now, I went back to teach at the college that I graduated from. Okay? And I could walk around, there was some faculty teaching the same lectures on the same yellow tablets that were doing it when I was there 20 years earlier. Hadn't changed a thing. The book was the 19th edition, they were still lecturing for the first edition. Right? So we have to think about that, thank you. So we have to look at that. Okay? We focus toward the right activities, advising. Those high impact activities. Well, to do that, what do we have to know? What the right activities are. What are the right activities here at this institution that you think are high impact and help students become successful? Yes? I'm sorry? Tutoring center.
Daycare facility.
Daycare facility.
Student ambassador program.
Student ambassador program.
Our student clubs.
Student clubs. What else?
Service learning.
Service learning. What else?
Student employment.
Student employment. Okay? Or how are we channeling people to those high impact activities? Are we talking to students from a standpoint of that's not just a good place to go, but this is going to significantly impact whether you're successful or not? Those are two different conversations. You need to go to the tutorial center is a totally different conversation if I say go to the tutorial center has a direct impact on whether you're successful. Here's what we know within that. Because students don't go places just because we tell them to. And then they walk in, they do this.
What are you going to do for me?
I don't know.
Why are you here?
That lady sent me. No, that lady, that other building, she sent me.
And why did she send you?
I don't know.
Are you having a hard time in her course?
I don't have it for a teacher.
Well, what was your interaction with her?
There line was a line, and I gotta hit it. Don't you have those students do that? And it's that lady, it's always that lady. Men would never accuse them. It's always that lady over there. Okay? And I promise you, that lady really truly believes she told me why I needed to come see you and what I needed to do. But I lost it somewhere in between. So either I don't go or I go and it's not productive. So how do I change that and make a high impact activity? I don't let you leave my office and you have developed a set of questions that you're going to ask when you go to that office. No, I didn't say I gave them the questions. The questions they need to ask and the information they need to know. And then next time they come to see me, I've got to set those questions. I tell them, what did you learn? What did you find out? You see the difference between just saying, go to the Learning Center and make it a high impact activity? Communication, connection. Are we asking the questions? And folks, it's okay to put people on the spot. John 2, stand up. Do my advising.
Okay.
And I see you the second week of the semester.
Okay.
I say, hey, how's everything going?
Great.
Good, lady. See that, bye-bye. I did what Carmen told me. I was nice to him. I asked him a question, I've done my job. I see him at the end of the semester and I say, John 2, you got a .2 GPA. What happened?
Oh, just didn't.
Didn't what?
I was shooting for C's, C's earned degrees. Didn't work.
Why didn't it work?
Life got in the way.
Let's change this conversation. I see John the second week of the semester and I say, John, how's everything going? Same answer.
No, not so
No, did you say not so
well.
well?
Good.
Good. You said good.
Great.
Tell me what good would look like if I saw it.
I'm still here, babe.
You're still here. What else would it look like?
Doing well in my classes.
Okay, how do you know? What's well? Is this a harder conversation?
Yeah.
Have I put you on the spot?
Definitely.
Good! It's okay to put people on the spot. It's okay to ask hard questions. We do it every day in the classroom. Right? The hardest thing I had to learn when I started teaching is silence is okay. Because I'd ask a question. If they didn't answer in 3 seconds, I told them the answer. Because I didn't want anybody to be quiet. Okay? I can now stand for days. I can look at you for hours. But I tell my students, sing me a song, do me a dance, tell me a joke, but you're not going to just sit there and say nothing. Okay? So we've got to make sure that we understand it's okay to put advisors on the spot. You know, we're not here to just surface them. We're not here to just help them. We're here to teach them. And how, those of you who are faculty, what are the best teaching strategies?
Asking questions.
Asking questions. Getting them involved. What else?
Attaching consequences to it.
What?
Attaching consequences.
Attaching consequences.
I like your idea of just speaking of someone to answer the question.
Very good. Okay. That's what we do in the classroom. We take those same strategies to our advising sessions with students. It's the same type of thing, it's just a different curriculum. The problem is we don't always teach faculty what the curriculum is. So we've got to have stronger professional development for our faculty in that area. All right? We know those are a whole list. Freshman seminar, you can go down and see what you have, what you don't have. But we know the literature tells us that those are those really high impact service learning. Someone said, I don't remember who said service learning. Somebody did. We got to know the difference between service learning, right, and community service. Community service is I go pick up trash on the side of the road. Service learning is I go pick up trash and I reflect on it. Okay? All right? What matters most is what students do, the effort they expend, not who they are. We've all had students walk in who were summa cum laude in high school and did not make it through the first semester. Right? And we've all had students who we wondered how they found the building and they graduated. So really what they do when they get here is more important than what they did before. But who they are affects what they do. If I'm a first generation student, I don't know what to do. I've got to be taught. If I'm an academically at risk student, I've got to be caught up and know how to learn in order to do that. But the bottom line is, students come believing that it's already predestined. I did great in high school, I'm going to do great in college. I didn't do well in high school, I'm not going to do well in college, but I don't want to go to work yet. All right? We can change that by our conversations. We can change that by the way we require them to participate in class. We can change that in the way we talk to them in our conversation. I love this. We're all faced with a series of great opportunities Berkeley describes it as unsolvable problems. I guarantee you, all of you, I can get a list. We take a list, and y'all would tell me every unsolvable problem that exists at this campus. And then we can take that list and totally revamp it to say, okay, these are really opportunities. What can we do to solve these problems? Most of us stay and just talk about the problems. We don't go to the next step of how we're going to solve it. If a student tells you, I didn't do well on that test because I didn't study, what do you tell that student? What do you tell that student? I'm sorry? Study. But what else do you tell that student?
I think part of this is you're taking the extra step and saying, how can I help you study?
Very good. Tell me how you studied, what the strategies were. Okay, so I'm taking an unsolvable problem and I'm giving it an opportunity within that. And sometimes we need to recognize we do it both ways. I didn't do well with my students many times because when a student made an A on something, I never said to them, how did you make an A? What do you do on this paper that was different than your last paper that you got an A on this one? Because then I want you to apply that to every paper you write in the future. When they make an A, we just happily give them an A and we move on. So we got to quit focusing on just students who do poorly, but also focus on students who are doing well. And find out well and have them take those. I know I'm almost supposed to be through, but we'll move on. Some promising philosophical things that you need to think about, look at literature, advising teaching and learning, collaborative reflection decision making, aka assessment. We've got to quit making decisions without evidence. We make decisions because we think it will work. That is not evidence. We make decisions because they do that down the road and it works there, but they don't have your students, and they don't have your faculty, they don't have your support. We've got to find evidence. And then you cannot say this was highly successful because the students looked happy. That's not evidence. You gave them chocolate. That's why they looked happy. Okay? But we also can't say this was a total failure without evidence. And many times we throw the baby out with the bathwater. We take something we've done once and it didn't work well and we throw it out instead of assessing it and saying, what did we do wrong? Why wasn't it successful? How are we going to change it in year 2 and see if that impacts whether it's successful or not? We tend to throw things out if we've done them once because we want to move on to something that we think is going to work. Self-authorship, the idea of students be determining who they are, not telling students who they are supposed to be, but helping them discover who they are, and then optimizing the student experience. How do we take advice and get them more involved? What are we doing in those conversations to have them have a better experience? I want to leave you with 5 takeaways. 1, we need to develop a talent development approach to advising, not a list of things you don't do well. Student walks in, we say, oops, you failed, you got to take remedial math, remedial English, remedial writing, you didn't take all these courses in high school, you don't have any financial aid, I will come back tomorrow. Yeah, you made me feel real good. Okay? We've got to begin looking at what they're bringing as talents. Everybody has talents, which means we've got to know more about them than just their transcripts and their test scores. What do we know about those students within that? We've got to meet students where they are. Which means we got to know where they are emotionally, culturally, whatever the case may be. I taught in Atlanta High School. I taught in a school exactly 7 miles from downtown Atlanta. I assumed my students had been to plays and operas and music and museums. They had never ever, because this was a community that said if you go downtown Atlanta, you go get mugged. I made a total misconception. So we have to think about where they're coming from, which means we've got to ask more questions. We got to make advising a tag team activity. We cannot do it alone. We've got to find partners. Who do we work with? We've got to build a sense of community that we're all working together and each of us have the same goal in that student persistent graduation. All right? Got to help us map out a path to success. That's extremely important. And how many of you have a GPS in your car? 1, 2. How many of you use MapQuest when you go somewhere? Okay. Cool. Go 5 miles, turn left. Go 4 miles, turn right. Go 5 miles, turn left. You're where you are. It's wonderful. How many of you get lost using GPS or MapQuest? Why? What are some of the reasons? Jonathan? Distractions. Radio, cell phone. Sometimes our students don't do well because of the distractions in their lives. Work, family, children. Why else you get lost?
They're out of date.
Out of date. You know, that student's still reading the catalog from 2002. And they don't have the most updated material. Faculty have not been given the most updated material in a way that you can get to it easily to help students with that. So we're still telling them all policies and procedures. What else? Why did you get lost? Construction? You know, they tell you to go down Highway 50, but Highway 50 is closed. You know, I was driving from Lake of the Ozarks to Memphis, where you cannot get to, 2 nights ago, and I went through Arkansas 6 times on the same road. He said go Highway 50 for 30 miles. Highway 50 was out because the bridge was out, so the detour was 130 miles around it, and my GPS wasn't working. And I just kept waiting to hear the Deliverance banjos. Because it was a scary place. Okay? So construction can do it too. What else? You've all done it. That cannot be right. I know you turn left instead of right. This thing's wrong. And it was right. How many times have you told students to do something and they did exactly the opposite? And they walk in and say, this didn't work. And you say, it's because you didn't do what I told you to do. What's the little lady say on GPS if you get lost? What does she say? She doesn't say, dumbass, you're lost. What does she say? Recalculating. Recalculating. In the sweetest little voice. Recalculating. And she doesn't get angry every time you get lost. It's the same voice. Are we teaching students how to recalculate? Are we teaching students that if they're not successful the first time, they're not going to ever be successful again? Are we teaching them how to recalculate? And your pathway is not going to be the same as yours. You get up tomorrow morning and you want to drive from Boston to San Francisco. And you want to drive from Washington, D.C. to Miami. And you get 3 miles from Miami and say, no, I think I want to go to Minneapolis instead. Does your GPS send you all the way back to Washington, make you start over and start? No, it gives you a pathway to get there. Sometimes when students change majors, it's as if they've gone to a whole new school. They don't even recognize this place anymore. So we've got to think about how we transition students in change and how we help them in that whole aspect. We've got to make every interaction meaningful. Every time I see a student, we've got to make it meaningful. People asked me about group advising yesterday. Group advising is excellent if it has a purpose, which means you need to have a set of learning outcomes. What are we going to talk about? How are we going to assess it? Throwing a box of pizza in the middle of the table is not group advising. And that's what we do a lot of times within it. Okay? And then last, we've got to focus on culture sooner than later. We've got to recognize no matter where your students live, they're going to be working in the most diverse society in the world. How many of you have called your bank or your cell phone or a company recently and got somebody to talk to you and it was someone with an accent, and your first thought is they shouldn't be allowed to do this if they can't talk English, was because they're in India. I mean, we've been transferred there. Okay? So we're going to be working in the most diverse world possible. And we have to teach our students that. From day one, we have to do that. And diversity is not the same. Meaning, there's a difference between treating students equally and treating students equitably. I got an 18-year-old, right out of high school, cheerleader, 4.0, summa cum laude. And I've got a 45-year-old American Indian who has just gotten laid off his work, has just gone through a divorce, and is coming out as a gay man. And I treat them exactly the same. Because I need to treat people equally. We treat them equitably. How many ever killed a houseplant here? Everybody has. And the major reason is we do the same thing with them every day. We give them all water the same day. We put them all in the sunshine. We put them all on the deck. We do everything because that's the schedule. Some plants need water once a day. Some need it once a month. Some need it 3 times a day. Some need total sunlight. Some need total shade. When we treat plants all the same, some die. When we treat students as if their differences don't matter and they're not important, some are going to be unsuccessful. So we have to really think about that. And going to one more human resources out of HR ain't going to get you there. Right? How many of you go throw up, you have to go to another diversity workshop out of human resources? It's because we've been going to it for 30 years and nothing's changed. So how are we going to begin changing students? And don't think because you recognize difference, you are being diverse and look at the idea. John, how rich would you be if you had a nickel for every time in your life somebody said, John, how do all the black men feel about that? You'd be a millionaire, wouldn't you? Because there's 2 things, folks. John knew he was black. I didn't need to tell him. And John knew he was a man. I didn't need to tell him. But I think because I pointed that out, that I'm being multicultural. Okay? All I'm doing is show my stupidity. But we know that happens every day. Which the faculty members try to really bring you out, make sure you know, and we do those different things. So we got to learn what diversity really is. Have you ever been the only in a room? Ever been the only woman? The only man? The only Hispanic? The only African American? The only GLBT? The only person who didn't speak Spanish? The only person who didn't speak English? If you've never been an only, how do you know how an only feels? And some of us have never been an only. You know, there's a real good article in the Chronicle that says we will know how serious how it is about diversity in 15 years. We will know. Because in 15 years, everybody above the age, everyone with the title of President, Chancellor, Vice President, Faculty Affairs, Student Affairs, and Deans, 15 years, 82% of them will be retired. Because we've all, the baby boomer age. And at the end of those 15 years, if our campuses still look the same, that it's primarily run across the world with straight white men, then we're not going to have made any type of efforts to be multicultural and higher end. And we won't have another chance for 30 more years. So we've got to really think about these differences. Okay, I want to end with a story, and I know I'm over time, Carmen, but I'm going to end with a story very quickly. Okay? We're in Santa Fe. We're in Albuquerque, so I know lots of you are going to raise your hand. How many of you have been in a hot air balloon? See, lots of you raise. Okay? 1997, we go to summer institutes everywhere. 1997, we were in Park City, Utah, and my small group came in on Monday, and they said, Charlie, let's go in a hot air balloon. I said, okay, that sounds fun. Okay, folks, if you go to the dictionary under peer pressure, I'm there. I will do anything the group's doing. So I paid my $50. I got in. Now I've got to make my best friend Nancy King go with me, but I got in. We got to meet the bus at 5 o'clock in the morning to go to the hot air balloon park. I'm down there at 2, drinking coffee, smoking cigarettes. because I've had that dream all night long that when you fall and you wake up, because I've been up all night. I was like, we get on the bus, and I turn to Nancy and I said, Nancy, I cannot do this. I'm going to wet my pants. Because if I stand on that chair, folks, I get scared. I'm petrified of heights. And I said, I can't do this. And Nancy, in her best South Georgia, best Southern Belle guilt, said, but you must. It's now a matter of integrity. You told these people you would, and now you have to. She's a good guilt mama from the South. Well, we get to the hot air balloon part, and Nancy says, this is not smart. These baskets are not big. And I said, it's a matter of integrity. But it was a picnic basket. Picnic basket. You get one, you put forks and knives and spoons and something, and in form, they put 3 of you in each one of those little things. And then it goes up. I taught English, speech, drama. I didn't teach physics. Somewhere between hot and air, I hadn't thought about fire. There's fire right here in your face. It is singeing your eyebrows. It is loud. I can't even be heard screaming like a 13-year-old girl. And I am on this hot air balloon. I'm petrified. We went up 9 million miles. He cut off the hot air, he turned off the fire. Total silence. I saw the world from a place I've never seen it before. I saw birds flying directly in front of my face. I saw the way the earth curved. It was the most life-changing event of my life in what we did. For some of your students, the most life-changing event for them is to get a degree and graduate from this college. But they're not going to make it if they don't have you to help them take that hot air balloon ride. Each of you make a difference in each student's life. Take that to heart, continue to do what you're doing, and thank you for letting me be here today with you. Thank you.